Good morning, guys. So today we're going to be taking a look at composite functions. So composite functions are basically plugging in x values into a function, getting an answer, and then plugging that answer into another function. So you can see in this problem here, we have the instructions evaluate, and the way that we pronounce this is g of f of -4, and they give us two graphs. So let's back up a little bit before we even start answering this problem. Let's go ahead and just kind of dig deep into what this equation or what this expression actually is telling us. So f of x, we've heard this before. This is just a function. And so what they're telling us is to figure out, well, what's the value of function f, which is actually this graph right here, right? It says y equals f of x. But when x is equal to -4. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the f of x graph, and we're going to look at where x is -4. So x is -4. Right, x of -4 is right here, and what we're looking for is the y value. So once we find x equals 4, we're going to find, well, what is that y on the graph? So it looks like it's right about here, and that y value is -1. All right, so we have an answer of -1 for f of -4. So this entire expression right here can be replaced with -1. And so what that means is we would then have something that says g of -1, because that's the value that we replaced for f of -4. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the graph of g of x, and we're going to look at, well, what's the y value when we have an x that equals -1. So let's go ahead and zoom into this. X is -1 right here, so let's go ahead and find where that lands us on the actual graph. Looks like right about there, and that y value is -3. So the answer of g of f of -4 is -3. All right, let's go ahead and try one more. So here we have a similar problem. It says g of f of 7. So we're going to start with first finding what is the y value of the function f when x is 7. So we're going to look at the graph that's labeled f of x, since that's what we're evaluating first. So when x is 7, let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. When x is 7, right here, let's see where that takes us on the graph. So here is the graph at x equals 7, and that y value looks like it's -3. So now I'm going to go to my g graph, g of x, and I'm going to figure out, well, where do we have, or what is the y value when x is -3? So it's kind of like a trail. So x equals -3 is right here, and the graph actually crosses right through the x-axis at that point. So the y value is actually 0. So let me just recap really quickly. The first thing we did is we found where x is 7. Right, x is 7, and we figured out that that crossed at y equals -3. So then I went to the other graph. When x is -3, my y value is 0. So we are always after the y value. All right, but we just have to kind of follow the path that the functions are leading us in. So we have y equals 0. All right, so let's try one last one. So this one, we're looking at the graph of f of x at -6. So at -6 on the graph of f of x, we have a y value of +3, right? This y value of +3. So now I'm going to take that 3, and I'm going to look at the other graph at x equals 3, which is right here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm looking for what's the y value when x is 3 right here. So if I follow this down to my graph and I see the intersection here, my y value ends up being a -1. So that's all there is to these questions. We're going to be looking at how to find these in the next video, but without having a graph given to us, because we don't need to have the graph.